All right, it's 7 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. This is a City of Tiger Planning Commission public meeting. Today is April 18th, 2022. Happy Tax Day. Doreen, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes. President Hu,
Here.
Vice President Jackson,
Present.
Commissioner Brandt,
Present.
Commissioner Miranda,
Here.
Commissioner Roberts,
Here.
Commissioner Shook, Commissioner K7, and Commissioner Watson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda, communications. Commissioners, do you want to share any meetings or news you want with the commission? I see none, so let's move on. Consideration of minutes. Doreen has circulated a draft minutes from our April 4th meeting. If you have any addition, deletion, or correction you would like to share with the commission, please raise your hand. I see none, so I'll declare the minutes from April 4th approved. Thank you. All right, so next item on the agenda is briefing of Tiger Home from our Associate Planner, Hope Polar. Good evening, Hope.
Good evening. Let's try to share my screen. Oops, hang on. Sorry, recently switched modes of sharing my screen, so give me just a moment. Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, members of the Planning Commission and President Hu. My name is Hope Pollard, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department, and I'm here this evening with Assistant Community Development Director Tom McGuire. We're here to introduce the Tigered Home Project. We're not requesting any formal decision tonight. We're just introducing a new project that's going to be coming down the line this fall. So we're not quite getting started on this project yet, but this is just to give you a little teaser of what's coming your way. So HOME stands for Housing, Opportunity, Mobility, and Ease. You may remember the Complete Streets project, which defined and planned for a system of complete streets that meet design and infrastructure elements required to serve each mode of travel, whether you're on foot, by bicycle, transit, or automobile. HOME has similar goals for defining and allowing for complete neighborhoods. So we're planning for vibrant and healthy neighborhoods where housing, economic, and entertainment options are all reachable without getting in a car. Its primary goal is to allow for complete residential communities that maximize opportunity for community members while mitigating potential nuisances and hazards. The Tigered Home project is based on 3 critical and urgent needs. The first of which is depicted here by our zoning map, where I want us to focus on what we informally call in the planning department the sea of yellow, which you can see around here. The yellow on this map represents land in the city that is zoned strictly for residential use. For those residents living deep in the sea of yellow, like here or here, it's impossible to reach any non-residential use without getting in a car. So over the years, through surveys for various projects like Tigered Maid, the Tigered Triangle, Washington Square, we've heard a really strong demand for residents, from residents for services located closer to home. Things like walk-up coffee shops, for example. So things that can't be reached without getting in a car. So I'm getting a message that you guys can't see me pointing. So that's unfortunate, but let's see. I guess there's a laser pointer option. So when I'm saying around here and around here, those types of use or those types of locations can't reach non-residential destinations without getting in a car. Could you see the laser pointer?
No.
Okay. Oh,
No.
Jamie's saying she can see it. Others are saying they can't. So
Well,
you'll have to just,
it shows up and then it disappears.
okay.
Like I saw you sort of swirled it around in various areas, and then as soon as you like unclick, there you go. Yeah, see it.
Oh, can you see my cursor now?
No.
Hope, it's the difference of those who have a license from MS Teams and those who don't. For example, I can't use most Microsoft products on my computer. So all I have to do is use it through the website, and I have very limited functionality. So that's the main issue here.
Okay. Well,
Oh.
sorry, folks.
Yeah.
As these briefings get more complex, I'll make sure that I work all of this stuff out so that you can see what I'm pointing at. But I think hopefully for the purposes of this presentation, you can kind of infer from the map. The red and gray areas are non-residential and the yellow is residential. So if you're living deep in that yellow, you got to get in a car to get anywhere. So yeah, over the years, we've heard a lot of responses from residents and various surveys calling for more services that can be reached without getting a car. Things like small walk-up coffee shops and that sort of thing. So we've heard this demand from residents, and we also recognize the importance of approaching all of our community development projects with a climate-first mentality. So most emissions at a local scale are generated by energy consumption and transportation, and a comprehensive emissions reduction is going to require shorter travel distances in order to become a reality. So this means we really need to be reworking our land use code to allow for flourishing, self-contained communities where various housing, economic, and entertainment options are reachable without getting in a car. So recent projects like the Tiger Triangle and Washington Square updates have done this on a dense scale, allowing for higher densities of both residential and economic entertainment opportunities in the same place. So we are not talking about that sort of dense scale in the Sea of Yellow. We totally recognize that the character of these areas is far different from that of the Triangle or Washington Square. However, HOME does envision bringing services closer to residents in that Sea of Yellow in a way that is compatible with the lower density we typically see there. So the second most urgent and critical need and reason why we're doing this project is that the city has received significant public comment over the past couple of years regarding urban agriculture in Tigard. Feedback contained in these comments falls into two apparently opposing categories. One is calls for protection against mess, pests, and endangered public health associated with some urban farms. And the other category, it calls for protection and expansion of the sense of community, education, and economic opportunity that urban farms provide. So while these comments appear on the surface to be demonstrating conflicting desires for our local neighborhoods, we can see a common goal that can be deduced from all of these comments, which is the desire for clean, safe neighborhoods built on a sense of community and opportunity. And finally, as the metro region continues to face a housing crisis, Tigard has always incorporated improvements to housing regulations with each of our new projects. And while we've undertaken significant standalone housing projects over the past few years, Tigard Home will also seek to ensure that the development code is accessible and amenable to a wide range of housing types and affordability levels. So just to recap, again, the ultimate goal of the Tigard Home is to address these three needs of reducing vehicle trips, addressing non-residential activity, including urban farms in residential neighborhoods, and continuing to build out equitable housing code. to foster a thriving and healthy community for all, mitigating potential nuisances associated with non-residential activity in neighborhoods, while also maximizing freedom for community members to use their homes in ways that uplift the neighborhood. So here's a little glimpse of a general timeline for this project. We're not started just yet, so this is a very general timeline, but the project kickoff is slated for fall of this year. And then we'll be coming back for lots of briefings and project updates and workshops over the next couple of years. And then we're looking at probably around February 2024, where we will actually come back for adoption of new code. So that is it for my presentation this evening. Tom and I are both available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. I wanted to jump in just a couple things at the end here. Thanks for that briefing. One other thing that we will be looking at is our home occupation regulations. We think that chapter, that set of regulations in our code definitely needs an update, but we think that there's opportunity, especially now that we've seen the 2 years of COVID, that we have some opportunities to improve our code in the way of allowing people to do home occupations. And similar to the urban agriculture, there are very sharp opinions on both sides of that. So the key, again, is going to be looking at ways to allow a broader range or more home occupations in residential areas, but also making sure that those home occupations are not creating offsite impacts or impacting the neighborhood in any way. So providing convenience, but not a negative impact on the neighborhood. So as you can imagine, those two items alone, the urban ag and the home occupations, those are going to be very, very interesting and difficult topics for us to deal with. So we're looking at more than we have for a lot of legislative projects in the recent past. We're looking at a very public engagement intensive project here. And again, this is a very, very early briefing. So Hope and Lauren, our public engagement person, and CD, they have not fleshed out what that public engagement strategy is yet. They have some ideas, but I just wanted to assure you that that is one of the major aspects of this project once we kick off in the fall, is developing that very, very robust public engagement strategy. Make sure we're hearing from all sides, make sure that all sides are talking with each other, not arguing, but we're going to try to get conversation and dialogue going so that we can tease out where the commonalities are, what the issues and the things that we want to avoid, so that we do this very carefully. I think it'll be a success if we have, the majority of people coming to you in 2024 asking you to approve this because they want this to happen. So that would be a success. So open for questions at this point. Commissioner Brandt.
Hi there. Thanks for the presentation. I had a question. Maybe this is a little early in the process, but has there been any thought about allowing the neighborhood bodega, mini mart inside residential districts? Because everywhere else in the world I've lived, they're allowed, and without parking lots. You don't need in a neighborhood store, you don't need a parking lot. It kind of defeats the point of having a neighborhood. So I just noticed that Portland is one of the weirder places I've been where there are some massive parts of this metro area where there are absolutely zero access to any type of retail whatsoever. And it's just a head scratcher. And I was wondering if we have maybe looking forward to some kind of changes like that to allow those kind of uses in neighborhoods where we could get people out of their cars and into quick things that they need.
Go ahead. Hope, do you want to go ahead and answer that one first?
Yeah, so we will definitely be teasing out the scale of what will be allowed going forward partly through a lot of our community outreach, and then also through just looking at what scale of non-residential activity then leads to like greater impacts. But definitely looking at how, we can allow for things maybe like a bodega closer to someone living in that sea of yellow, so they could walk to get some of those services. So I think, like Tom mentioned, we have a lot of community outreach to do with this and really balancing. So we hear from residents right now a lot of demand for services within walking distance, but not everybody wants it right next to them. So community outreach is just going to be a big component of that. And then also just looking into what are the actual impacts of allowing different levels of non-residential activity, so that if we can have confidence that we can mitigate those negative impacts, then that's the type of activity that would be allowed. So it's a vague answer for this stage of the project. But Tom, any?
I would add that I think that your particular example would be something that we would put into the mix. We're 4 or 5 months away from even starting the project, so I'm very optimistic about the project and excited. And the more creative we can get, the better. I'm always a supporter of throwing as many ideas and just anything and everything. Throw the ideas into the mix. Let's test it out. Let's talk about it. Let's see what the reaction is at the beginning. And that's the type of project I think we're looking at, is some creative thinking about how to make life that much better in our neighborhoods. Commissioner Roberts.
Very briefly, I echo Commissioner Brandt's thoughts that when I lived in Johns Landing, there was a corner grocery a block and a half away. There's a dry cleaners a couple blocks away, probably a couple of bars too. But to be able to just walk a block or so and get a bag of ice or some fresh veggies was an awesome thing. So thank you.
Commissioner Jackson and Commissioner Roberts, your hand is still raised, so I wasn't sure if you had another question, but Commissioner Jackson.
So I'm assuming that a lot of the strategies are going to be around changing code for existing zoning, but is actual rezoning on the table also?
I would say potentially. Yeah.
Yes. Alongside that too, I do want to also kind of repeat what Tom had mentioned earlier about home occupation permits. So I think even like the bodega type of example could probably be considered like not too far from what our type 2 home occupation permits are right now. And so our home occupation permits is going to be like one of the biggest things that we look at with this. But then rezoning potentially, like Tom said, throwing things up against the wall, seeing what will stick, to make for the complete neighborhoods in a way that residents are also ultimately happy with.
Yeah, and I want to temper that a little bit. I don't want someone public watching our briefing tonight and then word rapidly spreading through the city that the planning bureau or the planning department is going to change all the zoning and allow retail all through the neighborhoods. We are so far from being anywhere close to that right now. We are, as Hope said, we're spitballing and we're putting up ideas. I would say it's not off the table. That's a better way to put it. It's not off the table. It will be considered.
Okay, thank you.
Commission President Hu.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it's really early stage, and just my personal experience. I live in the middle of Tiger by Fowler Middle School, and yet there are lots of gaps with sidewalks, and I could not consider myself being able to walk safely to even half a mile away to the park. So when you mentioned this project, even though I don't know any detail about it, it started to make me nervous because I cannot even walk safely half a mile because there's no sidewalk, period. So but if you can consider maybe tying any business together with street improvement to add sidewalks, if you put that on the table, maybe that I can see a potential for support. But right now, if you just mentioning adding more business for walking, my thought was, wait, I can't even walk half a mile to the park without, fear being, hit by a car. So, so I know it's still early, but maybe tying street improvement together with this will be great. So thank you.
Yeah, I understand. I recently took a survey that ODOT had been circulating around, and that was basically the #1 issue I put down for how ODOT and other transportation, TriMet, Metro, other regional state transportation agencies can help us, and that is, we've done a lot of planning. We adopted the Complete Streets program. Now we just need some money to start building sidewalks and fixing streets and closing those gaps. So, right off the top of my head, it pops up, well, maybe we have a rolling implementation or something like that, or certain regulations don't go into effect until, we have a walk score of a certain level or something like. There's a lot of different ways we can do implementation that way, get the policies in place and things like that adopted for certain areas. And then, if people really want that will motivate some of them to help us out with coming up with LID, local improvement districts, or grants, or, all kinds of different things, looking for money to carry out these projects. So again, early days, but yeah, that thank you. That's a really important consideration that we'll need to put into the mix as we talk to the public. So I'm sure you won't be the only one who brings that up. We will hear that. Commissioner Roberts.
Okay, one more thing. So as I think about this, there's a degree of inertia that we probably have to deal with. When I look back at when I lived in Johns Landing, it was a sense of community. Everybody knew each other all the way up and down the block. And that had probably been that way in that area for 50, 60, 100 years. It was a long time. And what we have in Tigard is more of a commuter-based, at least that's my experience, the sea of yellow. Everybody lives there, they drive someplace else. We don't have that same sense of community. And and people are going to want to have things not change, right? It's like they moved here because they liked it. They've lived here loving it. And so I'm thinking there's almost a cultural kind of thing. And I don't mean culture in terms of, like national cultures or something like that, but at a micro level of what the characteristic of the city is. And so I'm just thinking that's a hurdle we're going to have to get past. And I don't have an answer, but you said, what do they call them? NIMBYs, not in my backyard. Everybody wants to have the thing, but they don't want it right next to them. And yeah, just raising that as a potential hurdle and don't know how to get there. Yeah. I prefer to bring you a solution, not just a problem, but this was the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Historically the suburbs developed like they developed because there was a certain, there were certain perceptions and perceived needs and wants for a certain way of living. And there's still a lot of that out there that's pretty strong as we've heard it. And, that's why I say the key to this whole project is going to be a very robust public engagement process so that we make sure that all of the sides and angles and opinions are heard, and we do the best we can to try to balance all of those opinions and needs and wants with, yeah, some fair, hopefully easy to implement regulations and other things. Commissioner Brandt?
Thank you. I had a thought. We have some beautiful parks in Tigard, and those parks could also serve as spots to put some other kind of alternative use in, the aforementioned coffee shop or bodega or something like that, because there are other parts of the planet I've lived in, and at the park is usually some type of small vendor set up, like a little store or a coffee shop or something like that. And so since that's already land that's public and we have access to it, and most of the parks have some kind of trail or sidewalk infrastructure already there, it could answer some of the concern that Commissioner Hu has, and myself and other people. So maybe put that in your scratch pad or ideas.
Thank you. Any thoughts from some of the other commissioners that we haven't heard from yet? Ideas, concerns?
Hey, this is Commissioner Watson. We've discussed on occasion live work type style of you know, homes or townhomes or you know, mixed use type buildings. Has any, you know, thing come of that, those, you know, those explorations?
Well, not specifically. We allow those, and it's certainly allowed in places like the Triangle, and I assume we'll get there with Washington Square. That's kind of, in a way, what home occupations is about as well. You know, definitely live work. I mean, you're working out of your home based on whether you're a tax accountant or boy, we have auto brokers in town that are working out of their home, and they're not exchanging any cars in the neighborhood. You know, it's all online. There's a lot of, again, there's with the internet, there's a lot of business models that are shifting to just online without really any customer interaction physically. I think, again, COVID has really accelerated a lot of that. People are being creative and finding ways to do things from home. And so I think we'll see a lot more of that, and we'll see. I know places that have, other cities that have specifically planned for live work, and they build units that they call live work. I've seen them in Portland, just down the street from me, in Hillsborough. They haven't been as successful as people were hoping.
Okay. Probably people move in, they live there like it's their a regular home, and put some curtains up on the bottom floor. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Some of the ones I've seen are like, I know of a person that did basically opened up a barber shop in their live work, and then they got so popular they had to move to a different location because their business was successful. So sometimes they serve as incubators. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to add that I think that's a perfect example of the type of thing that we're looking to work on with home too. So like currently under our existing regulations, we require a home occupation type 1 permit, even for like if you're literally running an office out of your home with 0 visitors and like no deliveries to your home. So that's something that we're looking at potentially adjusting. And we've been thinking about it sort of in the way that we think about Tigard Made for our employment lands, where we're trying to get a little bit out of the way and be a little less fussy where we don't need to be, while still regulating some of the more nuisance-y, hazardy impacts. So with home occupations in particular, looking at adjusting that process, because we're learning, that even through COVID, whether you're just doing your existing job from home or some economic trends that I've studied through MADE have showed that some of the unemployment that we're seeing today is actually because people are picking up and starting their own industries from home. And so we just want to be able to support people doing what they want to be doing at their home in a way that makes sense for everybody.
Okay, that looks like it may be the end of the questions. President Hu, this is again getting used to this. The way we all strictly adhere to cameras off unless you're speaking. I think that's great for a land use hearing. I'm not. It's a little disconcerting for the center for a briefing because I can't read your faces. I don't know who's sort of leaning forward and getting into it and who's thinking about asking a question. So anyway, just a comment. We'll get into that in the next topic.
Yeah, future meetings. If you're ready, go ahead, Tom.
So, okay, so I think thank you, Hope. I think that's a wrap on your briefing. Appreciate your work. And
Thank you, Hope.
You'll be seeing Hope on this project again in the fall. And she is also going to brief council. What's the date for council briefing on this?
It's next month, the third Thursday, I believe.
On the spot.
I think it's on the 17th next month.
Okay. So we'll see how council reacts to that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Hope. I really appreciate it. I look forward to hearing more about this.
Yeah, I think it's exciting.
Thank you. So President Hu, I think you just turned it over to me for the next item. So a couple things, excuse me, a couple things I wanted to discuss with you. I think I'll switch the order and maybe let's talk about the future meetings first and maybe we can get that out taken care of. So City Council is talking about meeting in person again in June. The last time we talked about it, I'll just remind you, we talked about the Planning Commission not meeting in person, having live meetings until basically all of the restrictions are lifted, masks and the 6-foot distancing. I will tell you, I've been in town hall. I've seen the arrangement for City Council. City Council only has 5 members, so they, even at 6-foot spacing, they fit up on the dais. If we had a full Planning Commission, it's going to be really awkward. Some of you would be sitting on the dais. Some of you are going to be sitting at tables in front. And, you know, if you're sitting there, we'll have to get you swivel chairs or something because you're going to have to face your other commissioners at some point. And then as there's testimony, you're going to have to turn around again to the audience. It's going to be really awkward to have everybody in that room socially distanced by 6 feet. Plus, we've got the plastic screens up all over. We have to have microphones for everybody. We have to allow for people to come in and through the screens above you to testify. And that's a state law now that all meetings have to be hybrid. So you're probably getting the sense from me, from the staff perspective, it's going to be a lot easier if we stick to kind of what we said, and that is we go with digital or virtual meetings until, you know, the COVID restrictions are lifted and at least the 6-foot distancing and that sort of thing, so we can get you seated properly up at the front end of the room. Otherwise, the logistics are a nightmare. So I will open it up for discussion amongst the commissioners. Commissioner Brandt.
I have just a quick question that I have not got a satisfactory answer to, and I don't expect an answer, but maybe so I loop back. But I would like to see the city ordinance, law, rule, regulation, or business decision that says that we are not allowed to use Zoom or Skype or some other technology other than the very glitchy, buggy Microsoft Teams. Because every organization I know they've all tried to get away from Teams because of these problems. Zoom, I've been on Zoom calls with 1,000 people before, no tech issues. So I'm curious where this rule comes that we have to use Teams.
There's no law or anything like that. It's the IT department, and that's their decision.
Okay, so maybe you could circle back with me. How do I get in touch with the IT department and have this conversation with them? Because I think we are probably violating some of our needs in terms of outreach to the public, violating goal 1 and goal 5, because I've heard so much feedback from the community about how terrible Teams is and how upset people are that they couldn't get in and see the proceedings because Team wouldn't allow them in.
If you have thoughts about that, I would encourage you to write to City Council.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
I will tell you, City Council, it seems to be pretty content with the way things are going, but maybe they just, if you feel strongly enough about it, I would encourage you to write to them and let them know. I mean, we have representatives from IT that are working these meetings now, so they have also heard what you said. So any thoughts about Planning Commission and our meetings going forward? And Commissioner Brandt, you still have your hand up, so I don't know if you... Commissioner Jackson? And then Commissioner Roberts, I think. I didn't see the actual order there, but...
I was just going to say, I do tend to agree that hybrid seems, and this is how I felt the last time we had a meeting about this, but the hybrid model seems more problematic than it's worth to me. But I will also add that I am fairly eager to go back to in-person, at least even if it was mainly us in person. Just because I think we have a few people on the commission now that have never sat behind the dais, and it's a different experience. It gives you a kind of a different perspective on your role and the process, and I think it's important. So I would just advocate, as soon as we possibly can, without any major complications, if we can return to in-person, that would be my preference.
Commissioner Roberts?
I agree. It is a different experience, and it's nice to be able to see the people in the audience, or the people who are going to get up and speak as well, rendering their for and against opinions. However, I'm perfectly comfortable staying digital until we get the all clear signal, basically.
Tom, you're muted.
Sorry, I was typing, so I was trying to save you the problem there. Commissioner Miranda, I think, was first, and then I think Commissioner Watson, and then Brent.
Thank you. I definitely understand the idea of being behind the dais would definitely give us, as having only been virtual, a different sense of importance or solemnity. And when it is time to go back, of course, that's what we'll do. But I do appreciate the all digital from a life balance perspective. Timing, it's a lot easier to get behind one's computer than to get to City Hall sometimes right on time. So I'm fine how it is until it isn't.
So I would second that. I work downtown, so trying to beat rush hour traffic, take care of my usual home pets and other things, and in a timely manner, and then get to City Hall is a thing. But yeah, there's a sort of, I think one of the things that I miss about meeting, having in-person meetings is there's a clarity to, when the citizens are testifying, they go up and they have a microphone and there's a light that tells them, when to start and stop, and it's not President Hu hey, trying to push into things and manage people's time and all of that. So there's definite positives to both things. And yeah, so I do enjoy not having to pack up and go go to City Hall and that sort of thing. Just being able to park myself at my desk right after work is a good thing. But there's something to be said certainly for old school way of it.
I would like to second what Jamie said and Miranda. Commissioner Watson and Commissioner Miranda. Excuse me, you get the terminology correct. I fully agree that there's a value, and we've all learned this recently about our time. Where are we going to use our time? And this gives us an opportunity to have more time to dedicate to this process if you don't have to be stressed out about traveling. That being said, I have worked for the last 16 years in a machine shop, so I crave human getting together with actual humans and talking about stuff. So, but I just thought of something. When we have these big, contentious public projects, like Cedar Brook, for example, it would have been so much better to have been able to be in person for that, for those of us who could swing it, because that one, 200-300 people, I don't know what the numbers were, but a lot of people. So I think having some actual people to look at and talk to may have gone a lot longer to helping that issue out. Thus, the technology issues, yes, those were a problem. But if there were actually still people be able to do one-on-one, that may have gone a lot further to help placate some of the bad feelings in the community that's still floating out there. So that might be something we want to take in consideration. If it's just like a forum like this, yeah, we don't necessarily need to meet. But we start looking, this would be on Doreen and Tom, we start looking at who's coming, what kind of comments, and it looks like there's going to be I don't know, whatever, X number of people wanting to show up. That might be the determining factor. Yeah, look, we're going to try to get everybody here in City Hall because this sounds like this is important to the community. And it also shows the community, and my feeling, and from what I'm learning at PSU, is that we are taking them serious and we're here for them to answer and respond to their needs. So something to keep in mind, we may not need to be for every single meeting, but when we have a big project, it might be worth it for us to get in front of our constituents.
Commissioner Miranda.
Thank you. I wanted to affirm or maybe make what you said earlier about it's hard to give these types of presentations to a blank screen. So if we could come to an agreement, if we're just having a presentation and the speaker would like us to be all visualized, that we do so. I do as well, George, in online classes. Definitely don't like blank screens, and I do like attentive faces, but it doesn't seem to be the norm. But I do understand in the hearing process that it's too cluttered. but my question really is, with the state law of requiring hybrid, if we are fully in person, what does hybrid look like? And does hybrid mean that, half of the commissioners are online as well? Or would public testimony come from in person and online? What is hybrid?
Well, hybrid would be, I think the commission would have to make a decision. You'd have to make a decision amongst yourselves as to whether, if we get back to that, whether the expectation is that if the commissioner can make it to the meeting, then they need to be in the room, versus the commission itself being hybrid. I think you need to make that decision. But then how the rest of it works is there's screens in the front of town hall and in the back, and essentially you would have the public who would have a link that they could connect in through, and then they would be up on the screen, and then at their time, if we're taking testimony, as we take testimony, we would have to work out how they maybe we do in person first and then we do on screen virtual, something like that. So they would simply, you'd have to watch the screen and listen to their testimony that way.
And how would that show up for the TV show?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure how the recording of that would be. We would probably, both things were being recorded, so maybe we would have to, if someone wanted to see the recording, we would provide both of them, or somehow splice them together or something.
I could see how that's going to be an archival situation.
Yeah, probably.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, President Hu, I'm sort of hearing a consensus, I guess. I'm going to call it that. And somebody speak up, definitely, if I think I'm wrong. But I'm hearing a general consensus toward moving forward the way we have been, and not changing at this point.
I would. Yeah, I'm okay with staying the way it is now. But as Commissioner Watson mentioned, I only been presiding over these meetings for 1 year and 4 months, but it feels twice as long. The online meeting is just taking. To me personally, I feel it took a lot out of me. So, but if I have to do it, I can continue to do it. But the hybrid system you just mentioned seems like a even worse nightmare for me. So, so unless we can all go back to all 8 or 9 of us sitting up there at the same time, I would rather keep it all virtual like this right now, because hybrid would be even more complicated, I think. And another thing, the city council is, I think one thing that's deciding tomorrow is whether to allow public to send in email testimony at the same when the meeting is actually going on. I would strongly prefer not that be the case. I mean, we had that happening once with Gary once, and I think that's a mess. So if it's possible, I would prefer not to receive public email testimony. For email testimony, I prefer to have a firm deadline of 4:30. So we will not have to be obligated to review any email after 4:30. So that's the only thing I have. So.
Yeah, we won't. We have no plans to change that. That hearing with with Gary, that was a kind of a outlier.
Thank you.
Got more hands up. Commissioner Miranda, Commissioner Watson.
Commissioner Miranda, you want to go, or you just had, okay, sorry. Oh gosh, I almost forgot what I was going to talk about. So this is sort of out of left field a little bit, but you know, there were court proceedings during the COVID, you know, during COVID went online, and there was, you know, so I wonder how they, you know, that's a very rigorous and controlled process about who can say what at what time. And I'm wondering if there's anything that can be learned in terms of how they manage testimony and you know, people speaking rather than you know, like it being on the commission to, or you know, or Doreen or Tom, you know, to be you know, in a sense confrontational when things are, you know, kind of when we have technical problems or what have you. I mean, are there lessons that we can learn from other government entities that have to, you know, have had to do this and in a more rigorous environment?
Well, my experience with the court, it's probably a better analogy with, we have had a couple of hearings officer hearings, land use hearings during the pandemic. And that's, I would say that's similar to court because you have this one individual, the hearings officer or the judge, who basically calls all the shots. And there's no, you know, pulling in the rest of the commission, polling commissioners. It's that person. I mean, they're in charge and everybody knows it. And, you know, our land use hearings officer has no qualms at all about telling people who are testifying that has nothing to do with the criteria, you know, cut people off. And it's easier to do that when it's just, you know, when you're the basically the only authority in charge. So I can talk to some folks in court and see if they have any suggestions, or and some of the IT people who've probably involved in both of those things. But you know, we have a commission of up to 9 people. It's
Different.
It's just going to be different. I don't see you know, we had that unfortunate hearing with the Teams problem, and it really all came down to a bad link. So it wasn't Teams so much as it was a bad link that got put out there, and we ended up in 2 different meetings, and then the controls got lost in that situation. I think our follow-up hearing, I'm not, you know, I know it wasn't, it's not the best world, but you know, we got through that. We got all the testimony. For the most part, the public was able to understand how it was working with the phone. We had a couple of folks who got a little confused about what was going on their computer versus what was happening on their phone. But, you know, for the most part, that worked out. And I will say, back to Commissioner Brandt's point a little bit earlier, in my 10.5 years here at the City of Tigard, we've never had a land use hearing that had that much interest and had so many people. So I'm not anticipating, you know, more of that. We'll see. But when we have our usual 5 to 10 at the most, you know, usually it's 2 or 3 people who want to testify. If we're up to 10, I think the phone and the system works about as well as we can make it.
Yeah, and the other aspect of that is, of course, you know, somebody is retired and they've never presented in Teams regularly or even, you know, done that, anything remotely like that before. There's always going to be that sort of, you know, the public needing to have a certain level of facility with this as a medium, and you know, that's always, you know, what can you do about that? You know, short of like providing a room at City Hall where people can go in and you know, you sit them down in front of it and the system's set up and they just talk at that point, and then we ask questions, you know, we go through the process, and, you know, if everything's set up for them, then they can, you know, but yeah, there's, and it's one of those things, yeah, I wish there was a solution rather than, you know, presenting a problem, but there's going to be sort of an eternal struggle in terms of not everybody's going to be used to this. You know, I do this, you know, I do this almost every day in my work, you know, and so, you know, I'm usually presenting a lot of the time. So, you know, whether or not people have their cameras on doesn't bother me, because you know, I'm usually like pointing at things in the screen and hoping that somebody will interrupt me if they have a question or if I was unclear for whatever reason. So, you know, but it's not like that for everybody, and you know, that's going to be a thing that you have to deal with.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson.
And to kind of follow on with that, I've been thinking about kind of similar topics recently. I think the kind of the familiarity that you're talking about is an important factor. We had some people during and after the Cedar Brook hearing that felt they had been disrespected, either because of like the time limits, or they weren't allowed to say whatever they wanted when they wanted to say it. Like when you compare it to a court case, I think most people have seen a court case on TV or in a movie. They have a sense of, okay, it's very structured. These are the people who talk. I suspect most people haven't seen a planning commission meeting. And so when they were confronted with this meeting where they thought it was, you know, a circle of chairs where we all get to say what we want to say, and that's not what it was, they felt, oh, I'm being disrespected. But if you're sitting in the physical room and there's people behind a dais and there's a microphone, I don't think, you know, I suspect a lot of the things that people said, especially during the meeting that went wrong, a lot of the things that people said in that meeting, they would not have said if they had to go up to a microphone and say it. So that's another reason that even though I'm not a social person at all, and I'm more than happy to be at home by myself talking to a camera, I am looking forward to being in a room again, because I think it sets expectations for both sides of the dais as far as, you know, what's the role, what's the format, how's this work?
Yes, I absolutely agree. And, you know, we have had, maybe not quite as big, we have had full rooms at Planning Commission that occasionally, you know, you'll start to get the clapping and things like that when someone's testifying, and the Planning Commission president has had to, you know, basically stop it and tell everyone, no clapping, you know, there's no clapping and cheering while people are testifying. That's no good. So, and it's, as you say, it's just the setting it's abundantly clear, you know, that's the situation. And so, you know, we get cooperation with that. Okay. Well, I think this is probably, I think we've made a decision there. I think that's a good time to segue into the next topic, which is, and I might say a couple of things, but I'm looking really for a discussion. So I'm happy to answer questions, hear things from the commission. But, you know, when everyone gets selected for the Planning Commission, I have a one-on-one, or sometimes it's small groups with each one of you before you step onto the commission. And one of the things I just hammer over and over and over again is the difference between a quasi-judicial land use hearing and legislative projects, briefings, or even a legislative hearing, and how in a quasi-judicial case, the emphasis is on the approval criteria and the approval criteria only. And there has to be something in the record from the applicant or other place that shows that the approval criteria is being met. And, you know, that's what the staff report will put together as a guide for you, a recommendation to you. And I always say, that's one thing to hear it from me. It's another thing to actually put it in practice when you have a room full of angry people. And boy, you experienced that in this last case. So it's tough. But that is your role in a quasi-judicial situation. You are basically in a role of a judge, a panel of judges. One of the things I would also kind of remind you is I agree about that hearing, the one that went technically wrong. I think there was a level of expectation or the impression from the public that it was more of a public meeting rather than a public hearing. And so that was a problem, and I think the setting would have been better were we together. The other thing is, keep in mind that this system, we have these land use hearings, the system is set up, and I heard some folks comment about this, the system is set up for the applicant, because the applicant is the one that's asking the city to approve something. They are spending the money to build something, to buy a piece of property, to pay consultants. They're spending a lot of money in many cases. And so, yes, the system, the way it's set up in Oregon in land use, it somewhat favors the applicant, not in the decision, but in the process, because they're the ones that are initiating it. They're submitting the application and they're trying to get a decision out of the city. And so that's why we have the goalpost rule. And that, in case you're not familiar with that, that is, we can only apply the approval criteria and standards that are in the code the day they submit their application. We can't apply other things that aren't in the code. Even if the code changes to have better criteria, we can't apply that at that point. So, you know, it is set up process-wise to be as fair, and I'll say not in favor, but as fair to the applicant as possible. And it is a personal frustration of mine for 30 some years that I've been in this business in Oregon, that the way state law is set up for public notice for land use cases, you know, we send these 500-foot notices to every property owner that this thing is happening in your neighborhood, and come down and provide comment. But the vast majority of people don't know land use. The first time they ever hear about land use is when they get that notice in the mail. And it puts them at a disadvantage. It's almost unfair to them to be invited to come down and express their opinion, when then all of a sudden they get down there and we have to say, whoever it is has to say, well, that's not part of the approval criteria, sorry, thanks for coming down. You know, I see that over and over and over again. And various jurisdictions, Portland tried for a long time. They have much more active neighborhood associations. So Portland tried to work through the neighborhood associations to do, you know, go out in the neighborhood and do trainings in how to deal with land use cases and what to expect and how the process works. But it's really hard to do. And again, people, they really don't pay that much attention, even if we said there was a class in how to be more effective in testifying at land use cases. You know, the amount of people that would probably take us up on that is pretty tiny. And it's really hard to get to the people who are within 500 feet of that next controversial project, because we don't know where it is, always. So just a couple of my thoughts on the process, a couple of my thoughts on frustrations that, believe me, the staff have the same frustrations, but, you know, we have to be professional about it, and we have to be fair to the public and the applicant, and we have to be fair to you, the commissioners. So I guess at that point, I'm interested in your thoughts. Commissioner Miranda.
I'm curious, like, if there's the opportunity on the back side of that notice or in a corner of that notice to, you know, link to a web page that has, you know, 5 bullet points or about those kinds of expectations. Or my question is, if they call the whatever planner that's listed on on the card, do they have, someplace to direct them other than having like a phone tag kind of or email tag situation where there is a little bit of that educational opportunity, because it is pretty obvious that people come with the expectations of their voices being heard and that it will make a difference. And my experience thus far is that, staff report says criteria is met, criteria is met, criteria is met, criteria is met. Well, I think it's ugly, but here we go, hands are tied. So yeah, setting that expectation for us, now that I'm here, I understand the expectation, but for the public, I don't know really how to give that civics lesson in a way that's a pill that is able to swallow, because yeah, I see a lot of disappointment.
Yes. And I will say that our staff, our planners, are very, very good at explaining the process, procedures, expectations, and that sort of thing when they're talking to people one-on-one. So when people actually call or write to our planners on the case, I think they get a good sense of things. They don't always necessarily listen. We talk about the approval criteria, and you need to address that, and you need to pay attention to that. I think several of the people that Associate Planner Linder talked to in this case did that. They tried to do that. But even then, when you aren't in this business, you don't know how this works. It's really hard to actually address the approval criteria. We had comments that were submitted where people mentioned an approval criteria. I don't think it meets this approval criteria, but just saying I don't think it meets it, that's when you need basically the land use lawyer to explain to you how that works, or to write findings, or hire a planner type of thing. And a lot of people just don't have the resources to do that sort of thing. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. We do put language in the notices that refers people to the criteria and all of that, but we can always, I'll talk to the staff. We'll try to think about ways we can improve it.
My thought is just as a way to make it a little easier or a little softer on them, because I can imagine.
Hope you just muted again. Commissioner Miranda, your mute popped back on.
Just talking to myself. I was just trying to make it easier on our planners. I can imagine that having to volley 100 emails to and being kind when the tone that they are receiving is unkind could be challenging. It would be. Is there an ombudsman for the public? Would that be you, where you would say, like, do you have questions? Call Tom. Or
City of Tigard does not have an ombudsman, but for land use issues, yeah, that tends to be me. The people, if they get frustrated with a staff planner and they don't think they're being heard, then it comes to me.
Yeah, I feel like this experience really kind of is an outlier, but with other committees like school boards and our other local councils, when they are when they are large groups, that there is a mentality that happens, and how to respond to that flexibly in order to kind of absorb it. I'm not sure how to resolve that at all, but I feel like there was some points in the process where it could have been guided differently, but it would require that entity that can be the mediator or the educator, especially when there's such a large group that's so organized. So I don't know. Yeah. I'm done speaking.
Associate Planner Linder and I did meet with a whole group of the more organized neighbors, including the neighborhood association rep. We met them in a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting after the hearing where we had the technical problem, and we covered a lot of that ground. So, but by that time, there's already a lot of frustration. You know, that application came in over a year ago, and so a lot of those neighbors had been in contact with Agnes for that entire year.
Wow.
So, okay. I didn't see the order. I think it was Roberts, then Watson, then Brandt.
I think so. I'll make it brief. So when Commissioners Jackson and Watson were talking about adding structure, you know, the structure of the physical structure, the dais, the structure of the process, this is exactly where my head went, was people think it's going to be a popularity contest or that they're going to have an impact. I like the idea of putting something maybe really explicitly on those notices that lets people know that this is, you know, you can come and speak, but, you know, if the conditions are met, we have to approve. And my last thought here is maybe we preface this in the meetings. When we start a meeting, it's a quasi-judicial thing. We start by saying, here are the rules. So they, you know, then and there they hear it. And it kind of reinforces if they didn't read the notice or they just came because somebody dragged them along. Just, you know, trying to set expectations early that, you know,
Commissioner
you guys have
Robert,
any
I think for this meeting, sorry to interrupt. I repeat those approval criteria and the method of how this will go more than usual. I think I repeated many times. So I don't. If the public still doesn't get it, I don't know how else I can convey that to them. I say that many times.
I didn't mean this against that you were doing it.
I understand. It's just,
you know,
as Commissioner Watson said, ignorance of the law is no excuse. It is what it is. And Commissioner Jackson, I appreciate he worried about public comment, thinking we are rude, but I think we just need to. I'm a lawyer, so I think we should just have a thick skin like lawyers and just think that we did the right thing and that's the way it is and move on. I mean, we can't worry about other people's feelings if we're doing the right thing. I mean,
I agree.
That's the way it is. So sorry to interrupt. I just
no. I think you're right on. I agree.
I say so many times about the approval criteria, so I more than usual. So I don't know how else we could have done to be more clear. So
yeah, you're right. People hear what they want to hear. They do. Thank you. That was it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Watson.
To add on to that, yeah, you can't please everybody. And, you know, you can just try to make it as clear as possible. And I'm an architect, and, you know, the law and the code and all of those things are about protecting the public. And, you know, it is essentially a community agreement that allows us to all live together and maintain our particular rights. And, you know, so yes, it's very important that the public gets to have their testimony and be able to have that, you know, their say on things that potentially impact them. But the law is the law, the code's the code, and, you know, we're also obligated, as Tom was saying earlier, you know, we're also obligated to help, or, you know, to enable people to develop property, you know, that they own. And, you know, and that's a lot of what we're doing here. And so, you know, and there's a process set up, and it all costs a fantastic amount of money, you know, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, for engaging architects and, you know, doing the research and you know, all of the, you know, lawyers and all of those things. You know, it's a fantastic effort. And and the developers, if we make the process too difficult for them, and I'm not the kind of person who's like, step on the little guy. Let's, that's not what this is about. But for people who are spending a lot of money, but the reality is that developers, if the city makes it too difficult, if they move the goalposts on the code, if they, if they set the goals too high, if they make it too expensive, and all of those things, they end up going somewhere else, and and that's potential employers, that's potential housing to help bring housing costs down. So there's a big picture. This is all a community agreement that we're trying to essentially create a process that enables development to occur in the right way, in a way that respects public safety and rights. And so that's what we're doing here. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but that's a part of this as well. And it's it all needs to be balanced and done as well as we can. But again, the law is the law, and people hear what they want to hear, and you can only do so much. And so that there's this pressure to like we're trying to wrangle these meetings and that sort of thing, or President Hu is doing that, and just or Tom and the planners, and that's the goal. That's why we're here and what we're doing, and I hope that we don't get too discouraged because of technical difficulties, or that people aren't really wanting to listen, getting everybody down. So I think I'm done rambling now.
Thank you. Commissioner Brandt, you're next, but if you'll indulge me, I just remembered one other point that I was going to make in my opening, and I want to make it before I forget it again, because that's where I'm at. And that is, I wanted to point out for this last case in particular, something that I noted, and I think Commissioner Jackson even mentioned it, but because it was an annexation, that it was going to Planning Commission and City Council, and because that particular developer decided to do their site development review, they wanted to do it as a combined application. Normally, the Planning Commission never sees a site development review. That type of case would never come to you. So that, I think, may have been something that was particularly frustrating for you, because site development review is a type 2 review. That means there's a lot less discretion. So you'll notice a lot of those approval criteria were either they met them or they didn't, and it was pretty clear. You're more used to plan developments, zone changes, comp plan amendments that have much more discretionary criteria and give you much more room to, well, some of them even ask you, that's the criteria, is to weigh conflicting goals or conflicting policies or conflicting comp plan, policies. So I just wanted to point out that that was one thing that was very unusual about that case, and you'll probably never see another one of those again, case like that. One last thing I also remembered is that because it was an annexation, there was a lot of testimony from folks who were not citizens of Tigard, who didn't live in the city of Tigard, and were asking for upgrades to their streets and improvements, and those are things that I think probably there were no sidewalks, and there are some issues with many of those streets, but they're in the county, and the city has absolutely no control over that, and we can't require a developer to go into the county. So then you get into these frustrating jurisdictional things, and that really drives the public crazy when you start to say, well, that's not us, that's them. It sounds so bureaucratic. I can't do anything for you. The county has to do that. It's just ping pong. So, talk about particular case that had a whole lot of burrs in the saddle or something. I don't know. That was one of them. So thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Brandt. You had a comment.
Yeah, I just want to speak to President Hu, and I agree. He did try to lay out the ground rules repeatedly. So in that, I thought maybe if we had a short presentation that he could put up, like a small PowerPoint slide that had 2 or 3 pages that says, we are here for a quasi-judicial. This is what it is. Quick little blurb for the Oregon statute. Here are what we're considering. Briefly, here are things we're not considering. And that would be, and there also could be a QR code in that presentation so people could click on that with their mobile phone and then go to a website that maybe has a short video that somebody from the state, from the city could do explaining what it is, or something else that already has been done, or to a small web page that the city of Tiger could have, giving a little bit more detail of this process. Therefore, when these come up, the president doesn't have to keep trying to talk over everybody to get them to listen. You can throw up that presentation real quick, a page or two, and then it has the rules of what we're here to do. Might save us all a little bit of headache, and also set up the expectations, because each meeting he explains this is what we're here to do, and those of us who are listening, we listen, but those people who don't want to listen are not going to listen. But if you throw something up there and you have that up there for a while we're talking, and since we like to hide behind our cameras and by turning them off, that can be up there, and then people would could have time to digest it, giving them a little bit, arming them a little bit better for what's happening. So that's my final comment. And so, but by the way, President Hu, thank you. You had a tough job, and I thought you handled it as best you could, despite the circumstances. So, no criticism at all.
Oh, thank you. I feel at some point I was trying to overtalk somebody, and some commissioners and you too, but I feel I tried to balance, between being a hearing officer. I try not to say that your thought is irrelevant or your opinion is irrelevant, and try and be accommodating and try to balance between those two. So I wish I could say, I don't care what you think, but I cannot say that. So
You're doing a good job, really.
Thank you.
Margaret Doherty told me that when I first joined this commission, I know I didn't have my hand up. She said, you're joining the most hated body in the city, except for maybe the city council. So I get it.
Thick skin. So
Yeah, at least folks can vote on a city council, right?
Yeah, just one off-topic thing. I think Commissioner Jackson, Vice President Jackson was telling the public that you don't think we were more rude than usual, and I think he forgot to follow up by saying that we are usually not rude, because if you just say we are not more rude than usual, that lead to people to think that we are rude to everybody. So don't feel special because we're rude to everybody. But I know what he meant, but
that didn't come out quite right.
Yes, like, have you stopped beating your wife? Yeah.
All right. Any other comments or thoughts about quasi-judicial process and hearings? And
Tom, I just received our recommendation for Cedar Brook to City Council from Agnes a couple hours ago. That's 75 pages, but I just scanned it really quickly. And even for me, on the commission for almost 7 years, I'm a little confused and concerned by some of the things she said. And I would just like to get your input and also the fellow commissioners' input on 2 particular points, because one point is that I know that her report to us saying that all those applicable approval criteria on parking doesn't apply because it's not dwelling units. And our recommendation to the city says that too, but she didn't stop there. She went on and said that nevertheless, the planning commission found that the proposed 92 parking space provided are adequate. I just don't feel easy about that because I don't remember us making that finding. So I just wonder, just by adopting all the testimony received, including the applicant's testimony, do we somehow make that finding that the 92 parking lot is adequate? I just don't feel comfortable that we made that finding. I'm okay with that. We find that it's not applicable approval criteria, so they can have any parking they want. But I don't feel comfortable that the planning commission made the additional finding that the 92 parking space lot was adequate. Can you talk more about that, Tom?
Well, I think maybe the words weren't those exact words, but I think that was basically the findings and the conclusion of the staff report.
No, the staff report didn't say anything about that. The staff report only said, because this is not dwelling unit, the parking lot requirement does not apply. It stops there. And I'm fine with that without recommendation to the city council. But Agnes went on to say, nevertheless, the planning commission found that the proposed 92 parking space provided by the proposal are adequate and serve the need of the facility without visitor, blah, 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 blah. I just don't know if the planning commission made that finding.
Well, if you feel that way, you can take it out.
I just don't know if by adopting the
I don't remember exactly
we indirectly adopted the finding that the 92 space is adequate when none of the planning commissioners say that out loud, at least. So what do you think the planning commission? Well, I don't think we adopt that finding, do we?
I think it depends what adequate means. If they mean adequate to satisfy the code, then yes. Adequate to serve all uses, maybe not so much.
So I don't remember exactly, and I'm not going to try to find one right now, what we said in word for word in the staff recommendation, but that, and I know what we said was there wasn't a minimum standard. There wasn't a minimum standard, but
that's fine. Yeah, we agree with that.
I thought in the staff recommendation, we basically said what they're proposing is adequate.
No, the staff report didn't say that. The staff report just simply said this approval criteria does not apply and ends right there. And I'm fine with that. I'm not comfortable with all the additional thing in our recommendation to the city council that Agnes said that we found. I don't think we found that. So.
Okay, well, I would recommend you let Agnes know.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And another thing is, I think we specifically talk about the traffic. We are only, because the staff report only have the traffic report or study. And I remember asking the commissioner whether we want to also adopt the final traffic report. And I remember Commissioner Brandt said we shouldn't bother with that. But again, in our version of recommendation to the city council, Agnes putting all that says that the Planning Commission finds that the final January 4, 2021 TIA is credible and persuasive. Again, I don't feel comfortable because we specifically say we don't want to talk about the final TIA. So I'm going to bring that up again to Agnes and maybe take those out because I just don't remember making all those specific findings. So I'm not comfortable signing the recommendation.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where.
That's why we send it to you.
Oh, okay.
We want to make sure that you're comfortable with that. We're basically we're paraphrasing and summarizing the hearing and what was decided and, balancing all the testimony that came in and everything in the record. And we're trying to get that record and your decision correct. So if there's something in there that you don't feel was part of your planning commission decision, then let us know.
Yeah, I just don't think anything beyond the original staff report is appropriate as our finding because we didn't make specific finding other than agreeing with the original staff report. So Okay, I'll make those changes or make those recommendations to Agnes and. Okay.
Yeah, I would support you in that, President. I think that's a good call. Let's ask for some clarification on that because I remember we discussed those things, but we never took a vote. We never said yes or no. We just said these are things we didn't quite understand.
Right. Okay.
Well, there's also the testimony received clause. And as my recollection is that they'd said that this parking was adequate in that it was similar to the ratio of spots to other installations that these guys had. So
Correct.
I think that may be our way around that.
So that's my question. If we adopt the testimony received, are we agreeing that it's adequate for the facility without us making explicit finding?
Well, it's one of those, that particular one, it's one of those things where if the case goes to LUBA's only going to go as far as this criterion doesn't really apply. They're not going to look at the
Right.
rest.
Right.
It's just sort of,
Anyway, as I said, I think the application should be approved just because this parking requirement doesn't apply. I just don't feel comfortable of Planning Commission making the additional finding that 92 parking spot is adequate for the facility because I don't remember specifically approving that. So making that finding.
I'm not saying the Planning Commission specifically approved that. What I'm saying is I think, and I'll look again, but I think the staff report, I think we were going in that direction by saying that this doesn't apply, but we didn't want to just leave it hanging in the air like that. We wanted to give the neighbors some assurance that we didn't think there was going to be a parking issue. Even though it doesn't apply, we think there's going to be adequate parking to serve the need. But I thought we had that in the staff report. But
no, I read the staff report again on that section. It didn't say anything. It stops at this criteria doesn't apply because this is not dwelling unit. So
we'll look at it. But the only legal point is, does it apply or doesn't apply?
I know. Yeah. So okay. I will request those things change with Agnes and so.
Okay.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Great meeting.
I hope that was valuable discussion for you. So, Doreen, I forgot to grab two things. I forgot to grab the rolling calendar, so I can't even remember when our next Planning Commission meeting is and what's on the agenda. But the other thing I wanted to let you know is, and you have heard about this a little bit, but we are doing City of Tigard is doing specific volunteer appreciation. So, you're all volunteers. You put up with a lot in the last couple of months. It's been, some difficult hearings, some difficult meetings. So I just wanted to let you know on the behalf of the City of Tigard that we really appreciate all the time and the thoughtfulness. And, I know you come at it from different angles and you're not always agreeing with each other, let alone, the public or the staff or the applicant. But I'm really thankful that you take it so seriously and you put so much of yourselves into it. I really appreciate it. You're one of the planning commissions, one of the most active planning commissions I've worked with. I mean, in the past, we've had some commissions where a couple of members didn't really say much. So this commission, I can always count on pretty much everybody to have a really strong opinion. So, and that's a good thing. And I appreciate all the time you're putting in.
So I have the calendar in front of me, Tom.
Okay.
The next meeting is May 2nd. That's 2 weeks from tonight. And that's Skylar Warren's Housing Compliance Code Amendment hearing. That's it.
Yeah. So good. That's a legislative hearing. So
that's a legislative hearing. And then we come back for the Tigard Made possibly on June 20th again. That's
so the
tentative,
next one,
though.
yeah. it'll be a legislative hearing on the housing amendments that we need to do. The few that we need to do to be in compliance with HB 2001, the housing bill that the Oregon legislature passed. So legislative hearing, so it's wide open. You get to talk, you get to bring whatever you want to it. You're not hemmed in by the criteria this time. Okay. Oh, Commissioner Miranda, yes, I did see your hand up.
I'm sorry. I should have raised my hand a little earlier. I know that I've kind of brought this up before that I'm looking for like a little bit of a creative discussion on what we can do as a planning commission in affecting code changes, and is it at when we have these presentations like today, is that where we bring up our ideas or our thoughts or our questions? Because sometimes I'm not sure where it applies. Like my kind of like determined agenda item of getting, permeable pavement and the walkways of these subdivisions near wetlands. I know that those are the areas that we have the most flexibility are in those subdivision type items, but I definitely feel like I understand the criteria is not met or is met of our process, but I'm wanting to affect a little bit more change and also don't want to miss my opportunities to do those things, to take care of aligning with our goals, specifically around energy usage, taking care of the environment, all the good Northwest stuff. So I'm not sure if we have that flexibility to have that kind of ease of a discussion, or if it must be within these kind of presentations. And if that is the case, I kind of have to figure out where to get my questions in. Thanks.
Well, definitely during any types of briefings or legislative hearings. So this briefing tonight, the legislative hearing on the housing, any additional briefings you have on legislative projects, the code, when we're doing the code hearings for Tigard Made and for Washington Square, those are all times, absolutely, those are the time to get things in there, because those are the projects that are writing new code. So absolutely those. Beyond that, if you have some ideas, you're always welcome to send me ideas and things you think should be improved, changed, addressed that you don't think is being addressed. And, I can either look at what I'll probably do is I'll look at those suggestions and see if there's a current legislative project underway or in the pipeline that can be attached to and considered. For instance, your comment about pervious paving near wetlands, that might be a good thing to add to our list of things. We're gonna, well, after the home project, so in 2024, we're going to entirely update and overhaul the sensitive lands chapter. So that would be a place where we would definitely look at something like that. But there may be some other things. Occasionally, I don't know if you've been on long enough to see it. Occasionally, we do omnibus changes where there's kind of a mishmash of little glitches in the code that don't even necessarily relate to each other, but we put together a package from time to time when we need one. And so, yeah, if you have suggestions for code changes and things like that, by all means, you can send them to me. And maybe, if there's some, I can even put some together and bring them to the commission as a whole, and you can have a discussion and decide whether that's something you want to recommend the city do. You're the land use policy advisory body to the city of Tigard, so.
Thank you. So be more proactive if I'm really caring. Okay.
Okay. I think
Okay.
that's it for me.
All right. Doreen, I think I mentioned this. I think June 20th might be a holiday, so I know the meeting is tentative, but
It's
on my
not a city
calendar,
holiday. I know
Not
it's
a
not
city
city holiday. What holiday
Oh.
are you talking about?
it's a new one.
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth.
Yeah, I don't think the city is
We
recognizing
should
that. Not
think-
that I know of.
Okay.
think the city is,
Do we
Doreen.
talk?
Yeah, I think you should check with,
Hope
With
or
With who?
whatever.
Carol, maybe Carol or Joanne, but I think, yeah, I think that's, I'm not sure which day, we're celebrating, if that's a Monday holiday,
Yeah.
because it's the
It's
weekend,
Sunday.
Is that like
Yeah.
brand new? Because it's not on the list.
It's
on,
brand new.
brand new.
Okay.
Brand new.
I'll double check with the city council.
Or Kenny,
Joan Bennington.
because Kenny sits in on the leadership team, so he may be aware of it.
Okay, I'll let you know tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Meeting's adjourned.